Christmas time is supposed to be a time about love and giving, and depending on your religious background, a time for worship. But that doesn't mean that every Christmas season actually plays out that way. Today, I'm going to explain to you how one New York City Christmas turned deadly. It's Back to the Riot series, folks. Viewer discretion is advised. Let's get into today's story. In the 17th century, the first Catholic priest stepped foot into New York State. He was a Frenchman named Father Isaac Jogues. He had been sent as a missionary to the Hurons in Quebec during the 1640s. Missionaries are people sent to promote their faith in places where their religion doesn't really have a strong population. And Catholicism wasn't exactly something on these Native American tribes' radar. So, Father Jogues lived among these people for about 6 years. He was very courteous to them. He learned their language and their ways, even though he was used to this completely different kind of life. And even though these natives had actually accepted the Catholic priest, there were some among them that did not feel the same way. Some of these tribe members had been among some of the English and Dutch settlers further south, and they had begun to spread rumors that Father Jogues was bad news. The rumor basically said that wherever these missionaries go, they bring calamity with them ever since being driven out of Europe. And it wasn't before long that he came across some warring Iroquois people who began collecting prisoners. Father Jogues, who had been hiding while all of these prisoners were being rounded up, actually stepped out from his hiding place to join the prisoners to help them keep their faith during this terrifying time. The Mohawk people would beat him with sticks. They removed his fingernails and chewed on his fingers until bone was exposed. His thumb was physically cut off. Children threw burning coals onto his body, and all the while, he continued to comfort, baptize, and absolve the other prisoners. And miraculously, in 1643, he was able to escape onto a boat bound for New Amsterdam, now known as New York City. He was warmly received as a martyr of Jesus Christ by the Director General of New Amsterdam. His name was William Kieft, and he later sailed back to Europe and arrived on Christmas Day. A few years later, Father Jogues returned to continue his missionary work, and wouldn't you know it, he was captured again. But this time, he was actually killed by a member of the Mohawk tribe in Asurnanon. He was later canonized as a Catholic saint in 1930 by Pope Pius XI. The following year, Willem Kieft died, making way for a new Director General of New Amsterdam, and Peter Stuyvesant stepped into that role. He was not as accepting of Catholic priests. Instead, he wanted the Dutch Reformed Church to be the lone religious authority in the small colony and didn't allow for any Catholic churches to be built. Any of the few Catholics living in the colony needed to keep quiet about it until it was safe for them to be more open about their beliefs. And in 1674, King James II of Great Britain granted religious liberty to the province. This was because he had actually converted to Roman Catholicism. This is also the same man for whom New York is named, having previously held the title of Duke of York. King James appointed a Catholic colonial governor, but this only lasted until the Glorious Revolution in 1688. This put a new king and queen in charge, so by 1700, Catholic priests weren't even allowed to enter New York. So a lot of the religious quarreling that took place in New York City was simple carryover from that era. One of those instances maybe where if your parents hated something, you're supposed to hate it too. And the big deal for everyone with Catholicism was the idea of influence from a foreign power, in this case, the Pope. There was just a large distrust for anyone emigrating to the country about where their loyalty lay. Then the other thing for everyone was tied back to the Protestant Reformation, but I'm not going to keep falling down this rabbit hole with you because we'll be here for hours. What you need to know moving forward for this story is that there were Catholics here in New York, and then there were a bunch of Protestants here in New York who did not like the Catholics that were here. Anti-Catholic law was repealed in 1784, and the following year, New York was named the first capital of the United States. In that same year, 1785, New York got its very first Catholic church. It was called St. Peter's Church. It was to be made up of mostly French, Spanish, Portuguese, German, and Irish settlers in the area, but there weren't that many of them. Of the nearly 230,000 New Yorkers at the time, less than 1,000 of them were Catholic. But this was a start. St. Peter's Church was built at the corners of Barclay and Church Streets in Lower Manhattan. Today, you can find the church behind the Woolworth Building and around the block from the World Trade Center. The original wood frame building was replaced in 1840 due to some heavy damage from the Great Fire of 1835, which I'll eventually do a whole video on. Now, St. Peter's was often a target for anti-Catholic sentiment, usually in the form of verbal abuse, although sometimes it did get physical. And although several people had let their discrimination subside when Catholics helped to fight against the British during the Revolutionary War, it wasn't until the Civil War that people really started to come around on them. So the period between the American Revolution and the US Civil War was a dangerous time for Catholics in the United States. There was only one archdiocese at the time, and it was down in Baltimore, Maryland. New York was not named a diocese until 1808. Still, Catholics regularly attended church at St. Peter's, and around the Christmas season, they were granted the opportunity to celebrate Mass at midnight. So, they did so, but a large group of anti-Catholic thugs, as they were described, kind of gathered outside of the church with intentions of stirring up trouble. When Mass was over and the people began to leave the church, they were harassed on the sidewalks, they were shoved, they were hit in some instances. The people who were able to get away reported to their aldermen, and the Night Watch was able to disperse the group of drunks for the night. Now, in 1806, the city did not have a formal police department. Instead, it had something called a Night Watch system. Was this a form of law enforcement? Yes. Was it great? Absolutely not. The men on the watch reported to the High Constable, a man named Jacob Hayes, and then Hayes reported to the city council. The city did not have an official police department until 1845. When things got really bad, the National Guard would get called in, as we've learned in a number of different riot videos that I've done. Well, after this rowdy bunch was dispersed for the night, the parishioners of St. Peter's knew that this likely wouldn't be the last time. They were unfortunately used to this kind of thing. And the next night was Christmas night. Certainly a night where churchgoers might be in danger. A group of Irish immigrants, who were not part of the prior evening's altercation, decided, you know what? I think I'll go to church tonight. But they didn't exactly go dressed to the nines with their suits and nice shoes. Instead, they brought weapons with them to church. We're talking clubs, chains, bats, pointed weapons. These guys were looking for a fight and intending to win said fight. As these anti-Catholic instigators made their way to St. Peter's, Irish folk from the block started to gather down on the sidewalks as well. And it wasn't before long that each side had a few dozen people looking to defeat each other. They charged each other and began to attack one another. Stones were thrown, fists flew, bats were swung, and just how bloody it got is relatively unaccounted for in history books. But what I can tell you is that this night watch was called upon yet again. There's even a chance that the High Constable Jacob Hayes was there. But one man who was definitely there was one of the High Constable's night watch captains. His name was Chris Luswanger. Luswanger pushed his way through the crowd trying to break it up with several other captains. He charged one of the Irishmen who was wielding a club, and he was able to knock him to the ground and disarm him. However, there was another Irishman who watched it happen, so he pounced on Luswanger with a sharp, pointed weapon. That weapon got him in the heart. Luswanger immediately fell over, lifeless. He was killed. This marked the very first time that one of the city's watchmen or police officers was killed in the line of duty. He died without a struggle. Luswanger was taken to an almshouse almost immediately after it happened on that Christmas night, and the crowd kind of ran for it after that. The mayor at the time was Dewitt Clinton, and he offered a $250 reward for the capture of the killer. 2 days later, the man was captured by Night Watch officers at a tavern he was hiding out at. Luswanger was the only known casualty from the Christmas riot at St. Peter's Church. So that's going to do it, folks. A little bit of a short video today, I know. I'm going to try to keep the stories holiday relevant this month, so be on the lookout for that kind of content moving forward. If you are new to the channel, welcome. I hope you enjoyed today's short story. Please leave a like, comment, or stories you'd like to hear. Remember, I am the New York City storyteller, so all of my stories will revolve around things that have happened within New York City. Be sure to subscribe to the channel if you have not done so already, and I'll catch you all in the next video. Deuces, kids.